Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. If you're paying attention, you know that you only make money when you work. It might be great money, but it's dependent on you. The information on this podcast will help you solve that. We interview experts and provide analysis into financial freedom through commercial real estate. Why? To help physicians like you thrive. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Surgeon Syndicate. This is your host, Dr. Michael McManus, and we are here today with Dr. Tyson Cobb. Tyson is a semi-retired orthopedic surgeon with over 40 years of investing experience across multiple assets classes. He is a board-certified orthopedic surgeon, a pioneer and expert in minimally invasive orthopedic surgery of the upper extremity, including the hands, wrist, elbow, and shoulder. Dr. Cobb obtained his orthopedic surgery training at the Mayo Clinic and has over 50 abstracts accepted for presentation at national and international meetings. He's published over a dozen book chapters and has approximately 50 research papers accepted for publication in peer-reviewed journals. He's frequently invited to lecture at national and international meetings. He's past president of the International Wrist Arthroscopy Association. Wow, that's a great CV there. So tell us a little bit more. Well, welcome to the show, and tell us a little bit more about how you went from, sounds like, a very successful orthopedic practice and moved into focusing more on real estate.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for that intro, and thanks for the invite to join today. I left my group in 2019, and I had been investing in farm ground and other types of investments, but not a lot in commercial real estate, and moved initially into triple net commercial, and then later into multiple other asset classes. And the interesting thing that I noted was that even though I slowed down and was only operating 1 day a week, my net worth exploded, and I worked less, I made more, and I paid less in taxes. So it was a fantastic transition.
That's a great thing to realize as you cut back on your working. So what really was the key when these things took off? So this wasn't an overnight thing. So you'd been investing, but was this when you had more time to focus on your investments because you were working less?
100%. And you hear that over and over, reading books like, Hill's book, 10X is easier than 2X. Cunningham says the same thing. You have to have time to think, and you have to have time to take advantage of opportunities. I remember I saw an acronym recently, and I apologize that I can't give them a credit because I don't recall whose social media it was on, but the acronym was POUR. Passing on opportunities repeatedly. And while most people wouldn't consider an orthopedic surgeon being poor, I think we're all relatively poor compared to what we could be if we truly optimized our situation. And, I think of the parable of the talents and how easy it is to maybe bury a talent or two and take the easy path, and fear keeps you out of so many things in life. And I don't care whether that's playing a guitar, learning to dance, or investing in multifamily. Fear really does prevent a lot of forward progression. And when we get to that point in life where we say we're just going to do it, then you make progress.
That's interesting. So for where you're at, a lot of people would look and they go, well, what do you mean about fear? So just tell, because this is something I've seen with doctors. So I that we've gone down this kind of well-defined path, and then going outside of that evokes a lot of fear and keeps people from moving forward. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, our listeners love the stories where they'd be like, okay, this guy succeeded and he felt like I did. I just like to hear more about the fear and how it held you up, but then kind of how you moved through it and what that led to.
Yeah, so I think the transition from an orthopedic surgeon into commercial real estate and investor and real estate professional is a challenging one because we don't get any training to speak of. If you're in almost any other profession or industry, you probably have some business sense, but it's easy to be an extremely successful orthopedic surgeon and not have any business savvy at all. So, I mean, it took me a year just trying to figure out the vocabulary, and it's a little overwhelming initially and scary because you're trying to invest money in something that you don't know anything about, and you just have to make up your mind to push through that, or you'll stay on the sideline forever. And unfortunately, some physicians get into some deals that turn out not to be good deals, and that happens from time to time. It reminds me of a story about an audio book that I was listening to, and they were talking about art buyers that would buy these big portfolios of art, knowing that 95% of them were completely worthless, but the ones that did hit made the difference. And I think it's that way with any type of investing. Fortunately, commercial real estate doesn't have the same failure rate that art portfolios do, but you're going to have some failures. And unfortunately, some of the people that I've talked to, their first investment was a failure, and they couldn't get past that. And what I tell people is, it's going to happen. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often. I'm in 40 deals right now. 2 of them are upside down. Haven't had any capital calls. That could happen next month, but if it does, I'm not going to sweat it because it's just part of investing. You're going to have a few of those stumbles, but fortunately, they're few and far between if you vet them appropriately. So if you vet them and you have the right team with the right people with a good background, a good history, with a good property, with a lot of meat left on the bone in a good area, that's probably going to be a very successful investment.
Well, and in your bio, you talk about you got into real estate because you got tired of inconsistent returns, volatility in the stock market, and moved into real estate for better returns and more stability. So compare that. So you've got a couple deals that haven't gone the way you wanted them to. When you were more in the stock market, how often did you see that same thing?
Yeah, a lot. And the other issue with the stock market, well, number one, you don't have any tax. You can't do a tax incentivized investing, it's huge for wealth growth. And the other thing is you can't force appreciation, so you have no control at all. Whereas with many of these commercial properties, you can make changes and upgrades and improve the outcome. So you have some control over what's happening.
So with a lot of docs I talk to when they're new to this or they're thinking about it, they feel, I don't know if it's a degree of safety of just traveling with the herd because it's what everybody's doing, or in believing that the people running their portfolio or their 401k, because there's very few who are active stock investors, which I think is usually a good thing because you're playing against pros if you're trying to do that. But there's somebody out there running all that. And, and so usually it's very hands off. How did you, when you looked at real estate, when you started, were you more hands off with it or just start more active? Kind of how did you go through that process?
Yeah, I started actively. So, a gentleman who I knew who was experienced in the triple net end of the world introduced me to some people and helped me make some decisions early on. And then second investment, I actually JV'd with him on a gas station / convenience store. And the third was another that I did on my own. And then the thing that I love about syndications is you have experienced teams and you don't have as many sleepless nights. When you jump out there and buy a $6 million gas station and put 1.2 of your own money in the deal and then borrow the rest, you may only have 1.2 in the deal, but you're responsible for the whole 6 mil. And you're going to have some sleepless nights. I promise you that. When you go into syndications, it's not really that way. Now, if you're on the GP team, you may have some sleepless nights, but if you're on the LP, you can let somebody else pull the wagon and worry about all that stuff.
Yeah, and from the LP side, you're not on the hook if it goes sideways. Your liability is limited to how much you're in the deal for.
Exactly.
Where somebody else, and that's funny because a lot of docs will tell me things like, they feel like when somebody's talking to them about investment dollars that that they're being scammed because they saw a movie or a TV show or something that had that storyline. But in reality, most of the time, the sponsors got a lot more at risk than the passive investors do.
Right. 100%.
And so with that, but the upside, depending how they're, the deals are set up, a lot of the time, if you got a nice value add, they can refinance your money back out. And I love deals like that where, your money actually, you get all your invested capital back within a relatively short period of time, but you're left with equity in the deal that can keep paying over time. That's a well de-risked deal for the investor.
Right. Yeah, it's nice. And now you can create two revenue streams from the same original capital. The other
Yeah.
thing that I love about the syndications is as long as you get into the ones that are structured right, the limited partners actually get paid first, and the general partners incentivized to make sure that they pull off whatever the projections are.
Yeah, and that's, there's the looking at making sure that they're, as you said, incentivized, that everybody's interests are kind of aligned and who's getting paid and when they get paid. So you said you started off in triple net deals before you did any multifamily, and that was because you came across somebody who was already working in that world. Was that something you sought out, or was that kind of a random introduction?
I worked with this individual, so we visited a lot about what his experiences had been, and learned a lot about how the depreciation worked, and what effect that had on wealth growth, and the leverage. The leverage makes a big difference as well. So when you start comparing all of the advantages to real estate investing to the stock market, it's a pretty easy choice to move over.
So when you found that person, I think this is a hard one for a lot of people, is they look at it and it's a little bit of a daunting task. Just as far as where they meet people, how they get the information. The stock market's easy, especially today. You can, go get an account with Schwab and start investing. But to get into syndications, was it another doc you worked with that then kind of introduced you to other people, or was it somebody in the community that you kind of sought out?
Yeah, for the syndications, I actually joined some groups. And as you know, I mean, there are networks like the one that you have where you can get an education and move into the active investing end of it if you choose to, or stay with the LP end of it. I enjoy doing both. I have more LP investments than I do GP, mainly just from a time standpoint because it is a little taxing. But I enjoy doing the GP end of it as well. But there's no way I could do GP for everything that I'm in right now. And the more revenue streams that you create, the faster your net worth grows.
And that's part of it. You're de-risking it too, because if you've got 40 different deals, you can have a couple that underperform and you turn out okay.
Exactly.
As you started moving into the GP world, you talk about some of your research background, and that's a lot of that in underwriting deals and researching deals that there was overlap there. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I actually became active in research in undergrad, published tons of papers when I was at Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is just an amazing place to do research. Spent a little time in the lab there and did some basic research, did a ton of clinical research. And that's a lot of what I do now in real estate is just researching teams, researching locations, researching the crime, the job growth, the population growth, and researching the properties. And if you can check all three of those boxes, if you've got a good property with a lot of upside in a good area that's growing with a lot of job growth, with a team that's got a skilled group of people with the experience and a good background, it's probably going to do well.
When you first started, so you were still working how much investing did you do when you were still working full time as a doctor?
I bought farm ground. I did pretty well on some farm ground. I live in the Midwest, and it does relatively well here. Other than that, it was mainly stock market.
Okay. So the farm ground and that's a little easier lease because you're not worrying about tenants and toilets. You got limited number of probably for each one. Were you leasing to multiple farmers, or was it kind of in one area and you could keep adding to your portfolio and having the same people farm it?
Yeah, it was mainly in two areas, and just had to deal with a handful of different people. Now, the bad thing about the farm ground is you don't get the depreciation that you get from the other real estate. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, and now
Because
it does appreciate over time, especially in the Midwest. It's done well in that regard, but you don't get the tax advantages through the depreciation.
did you have a background? Did you come from a farming family? You have a background in farming when you started down that road?
Yeah, so I have kind of an unusual background for an orthopedic surgeon. I actually grew up on a ranch in Texas and rodeoed professionally before I went to medical school. So yeah, I'm not your average orthopedic surgeon. I think probably the reason I wound up in orthopedics because I had a ton of orthopedic experience on the other end of the scalpel as both a patient and also friends that had a lot of broken bones. So riding bulls is a rough sport.
That's that's great. I grew up in rural Colorado when I was a little kid. I wanted to be a bull rider, and Lyle Sankey was my hero until I was about 7 years old. First time I entered it was a calf riding and ended up with a face full of manure and a scratch on my face, and decided maybe I wasn't that good at riding bulls and I should look for something else to do.
Yeah, that was probably a smart choice on your part. Good time to turn back.
was lucky that I had no skill at it, so I
Yeah,
didn't go any further.
yeah. I remember Lyle Sankey.
That's so you started off, investing in farmland while you were still practicing. How much were you still working full time when you started? Because you talk about you've done a bunch of asset classes, multifamily, triple net leases, car washes, RV parks, self storage, farm ground. When did you? So you started out with the farm ground, and then you did the gas station. How did that progression go as you started moving through different asset classes? And what were you thinking? What drove you to, was it, diversification or just finding other interesting things?
Yeah, it was partly diversification, and I was very hungry. I love learning new things. So I was studying constantly that first year, audiobooks, podcasts, going to meetings, joining groups. Joined Tim Broad's group, Legacy Family, later joined Rod Cleef's group and several other groups. And you just get exposure to so many different asset class when you start really expanding out and exploring. And then, yeah, I wanted to diversify. And, I feel like there's a lot of runway in multifamily right now. There's a housing shortage, and it doesn't look like that's going to get any better anytime soon. Interest rates are keeping a lot of people, a lot of developers on the sidelines. So I think that shortage will probably get worse before it gets better.
So, and we can come back into the multifamily shortage here a little bit, but since you mentioned some of those groups, because I know for a lot of docs that those are the things that I guess when I talk to them, they're like, oh, well, they cost so much. And what do you really get out of it? And maybe it's that fear of being taken. So can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with joining these groups and your return on investment for the cost of getting into them versus what you got out of it?
Yeah, the return on investment is very good. I'm probably in too many groups right now. I'm in six paid groups, but without question, getting into those types of groups and groups like Timberview that I have, your group, you get exposure to attorneys that know what they're doing, and they're attorneys and CPAs are like physicians. They all specialize in different things, and so if you're going to do something I like doing discounted rollovers where you take you do an investment through your self-directed IRA, and then once you take that cash and put it into the deal, if it qualifies for that, if you can get an attorney who specializes in that to do a valuation, and it usually winds up about 50 cents of reduction. And that's similar to depreciation, and it's a paper loss. So let's say that you put 100,000 into a multifamily deal, get it valuated. Now it's worth 50. You roll it into a Roth. If you're at 37.5%, you're going to have to write Uncle Sam a check for 18.5 this time next year, but you'll never pay taxes on that money again. So if you take that money, and let's say you wind up with a 2x equity multiple. So you got that 100 grand in there that turns into 200 whenever they come full cycle, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it is. Now you have 200, you roll it into the next deal, and it becomes 4, and then 4 becomes 8, and 8 becomes 16, 16 becomes 32. Let's say that we get to 5 cycles before we pull it out. So now we're at 3.2 million. And if you do the Roth conversion, you paid 18.5 this time next year, and your 3.2 million is yours. If you left it in your self-directed IRA, now you have to pay taxes on it when you pull it out. So assuming you're still on 37%, probably will be if you're pulling that kind of money out, you're going to have to write a check for about 1.1 million. So the math is pretty simple if you just play the video forward.
And these are things that your average accountant is not going to know about.
They don't know anything about it. Most people have no idea what I'm talking about when I talk about a discounted rollover. And I only know these things because I hang out with these groups and go to all these meetings and listen to people talk about stuff.
And that's a great point, because it's not just the things you learn in these groups are not just a lot of the baseline. Like you said, you spent your first year just learning the lingo, figuring out how things worked, learning how to evaluate operators. These groups don't just give you that information. A lot of that you can find on YouTube, you can find in books, but it introduces you to this network of people, and people who do things that you might not find in your hometown, or even if they're there, if you don't know to ask, you'll never know about it.
Exactly.
And that's, it's an interesting, one of my mentors always says he for years he went to his accountant and he was like, well, how do I save some money on taxes? And the accountant would tell him, if you make it, you got to pay it.
Yep.
And that was just the response he got, and it was when he kept digging that he found these things. So I think you make a great point there. For the cost of joining some of these masterminds, some of these real estate groups, which can be a pile of money up front. I've paid $10,000, $20,000, and it seems overwhelming, but I don't think I've ever not. I mean, in the short term, often that pays back in ways I didn't even expect. When I joined a group for, it's called Invest Beyond Multifamily, and it's basically we evaluate deals together beyond multifamily. But in the first year, I made all my money back from joining the group, from investing in one of the other people in the deals investments. And I never would have known about that opportunity had I not been in the group. So now the rest of what I get out of that is free residual. And
Right.
So I think those are some of the things that people miss when you look at the groups and all the additional advantages they can provide. So with that was a great lead in. So tell us a little more about Timberview Capital and what you guys do, and the opportunities that are there.
Yeah, so Timberview's started out as just a group of physicians investing together, and Timberview really just formalizes that relationship. I mean, it's grown substantially over the years, but it's really nothing more than that. So I don't charge anybody anything to do anything. You don't invest in Timberview, but rather alongside me in the investments that I find. So, as you know, the larger your investment group is, the bigger and better deals you can do. So your best deals and your biggest deals are kind of reserved for the people that can bring enough capital to make something happen. And that's one of the important aspects of your network that you're in. It's like Rod Cleave says, it's a team sport, and that is so right. You don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to know the people that know how to do everything, right?
Yeah.
And once you figure that out, then you just jump in with them and you're in the boat with them. And it's a little different than your financial advisor because he's taking a cut off your portfolio, whether you make money this year or not. But if these GPs, take you down a path where you don't make money on a deal, they don't make money either. They're getting some very small fees that let them keep the lights on. But other than that, they make their money on the back end when they bring this thing across the finish line and do what they said they were going to do to begin with. So you're all in the boat together. If it goes down, you're all going down together. If it does well, you all do well together.
Yep. So somebody joins you, they're going to get access to additional deals because you're out there doing the research and they get to just kind of follow along. Is that the way it works that they
We do some webinars, some education where we teach some of these things like the discounted rollovers and talk about how to evaluate a deal and what we look for. And other than that, it's I'm just available to talk to people if they have questions about stuff and so forth. And I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for people that were equally as willing to do that. And so I'm happy to do it now. And that's the thing about entrepreneurs, which I'm sure that you wouldn't know as a physician. Physicians kind of have a little bit of a zero-sum game mentality. And I think that's because we're so competitive in our education. In order for you to move up, somebody has to move down. And it's not that way in real estate. We all move up together. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I just love the mentality of Tim Brott says, you getting sunshine on your face doesn't take any sunshine away from me. And, I just love the fact that all these entrepreneurs just think that way. That's their mindset.
and it's awesome because things like and if somebody joins you, then often when you're looking at a syndication deal, so if there's a minimum investment of 50,000 or 100,000, and and I was just looking at one recently with one of our partners that pays, the minimum 100,000 pays an 8% pref, but if you invest over $500,000, it goes to a 10% pref. And so if you're investing as a group and you come together, now everybody comes in together at that 500,000 mark, everybody's making more money. And the sponsors like that because they spend less time looking for more people and there's fewer investors to manage. There's one example of how coming together works, but it's interesting what you said in our training, that zero sum game. And it's so true because we get used to this applying to a better college and you get in, there's only so many people who get in and other people don't. And then you're applying to medical school and then residency. And it keeps being this like, I got to get past everybody else. And you get into the entrepreneurship world and the real estate world is, there is some competition for deals, but I recently connected, what was it? I had a broker call me who doesn't really do short-term rentals, but through his network, he had some, somebody selling some short-term rentals near the stadium. Hey, do you know anybody? And I connected him with, somebody who did that. And there was no money in it for me. But then he comes back, it's the same thing. You're just kind of this, well, who does that? Who could benefit from this? And then somebody's thinking of you too. And down the road, it all comes back eventually. And maybe it doesn't, but it's pretty cool. It's different because we can all get better together and not, we're not trying to, somebody's not getting cut out of the class or pushed to the bottom half in the rankings.
Right. Yeah. Napoleon Hill talks about that same thing. And I'm a firm believer. I think it does all come back. It may not come back from the same individual, but it comes back. And, I think if you have that mentality, you approach life differently than you would otherwise.
So, And that's a kind of a great conclusion. So for this first half of the episode, I love that if we're working together and you're helping each other out, and it's very different than medicine, and I think different from some other fields that are very competitive in the job market. So I'm going to wrap up the first half of this show with that. So to everybody out there, thank you for joining us here on this first episode of Surgeon Syndicate with Tyson Cobb. He's going to be back for a second half, so please join us for the second half of this interview. And again, thank you for joining us today.
This has been an episode of Surgeon Syndicate. If you got value from this episode, you know other surgeons are hungry to become job optional, and you can help them by sharing this content today. Schedule a call and we can make a plan. Looking forward to having you with me on the next episode.